As a board gamer, and a lot of board gamers may be similar to myself, we grew up playing maybe more so role playing games, in addition to playing like Monopoly and those basic board games. And when we got our world opened up to us to role playing games, okay, we're not at Gateway Games yet, but when we found out about Dungeons and Dragons or some other role playing game, then we were like, oh, this is exciting. Okay, this is not the path for every gamer. It was for me. And when I found out about all these, you could combine a class and a race and level up yourself and have these unique attributes. I thought that is just such a cool mechanism, way better than Monopoly or any of the other games that I had been used to playing, or Uno or Sorry, right? And I haven't seen gateway games, mind you, yet. I haven't been blessed with the presence of Catan or Ticket to Ride yet. I'm just at that. All right, let's jump from basic board games to role playing games before I jumped back into gateway games land. And when I'm like, here's like basic board games, here's like role playing game land. When I was in role playing game land, I saw these mechanisms, but it's like these mechanisms were combined with a never-ending legacy game, which I didn't even know what legacy games were back then. But we just had this thought that I could continually play and continually level up and just grind, and eventually the thought was I could reach level 20. Uh, Now, looking back, I could have just created a level 20 character, but I wouldn't have been able to have the cool stories the whole time going through it that I couldn't have with Monopoly. Like, Monopoly was a slog and it was just really boring. I mean, some people have some really crazy stories for Monopoly, so I may be wrong on that one. But for me, the basic games like Sorry and Uno and things like that, like, depends on who you're playing with. You can always have fun stories with people, but the actual game itself, no, no, not so great. The maybe the game of life I had some cool stories with, but uh, that were not based on the actual people playing it. But yeah, for the most part, it wasn't those games that really were exciting um, and being able to tell stories from later. So the Dungeons and Dragons stuff that was cool. You could tell some stories later on about it, but uh, I grew tired of those ones, and I realized that some never-ending legacy thing trying to get to level 20 forever is not something that I could sustain in life. And growing up, having a job, having a family, and so when I or I jumped over to gateway games growing up, and I kind of did both, like role-playing games and gateway games, and then some more strategic games. I realized that what I really wanted to do was get more into things that I could spend some time on and still have some fun experiences and stories to tell from it. So I'm not into role playing games anymore, and I don't think I ever will be, and I'm okay with that. But I have a huge history of playing Dungeons and Dragons. Had all the second edition books, had all the third edition books, even a little bit of the 3.5. Then I stopped and still have those books. I was a dungeon master for everyone in my family and everyone in my neighborhood. But I've left the land of role playing, and now it's time to rank the different classes that I remember from Dungeons and Dragons in this tier list. So, Artificer, I don't remember that. So, we're not going to do that one because I only went to third edition. Okay. Barbarian, that was a cool, exciting one. That was like a fighter, but you have to balance this like rage thing where your defense got a little weaker, but it's okay because your attack went just really high up, and your hit points I think went really high up too. It's just a little jump because your Constitution jumps. Your strength and Constitution goes up, and your AC just goes down just slightly. So it's like +4 strength, +4 uh, Constitution, and then I loved reading that rule book thing of if you go out of rage, your Constitution would drop, and it could put you into a negative hit point situation. And if you ever reach -10 hit points, you're flatline dead. If you're zero exact, you're okay, you're unconscious. If you're at -1, you bleed out every round. So that was a cool mechanic already, and I think a board game should use some of the mechanics that Dungeons and Dragons brought into it. But if you just smack dab right into the zero, you're good. And so somebody could rage as their barbarian and try to like, all right, I'm done. I don't want to continue to fight too much because I'm gonna go down 2 hit points when this thing's all over because 4 Constitution is 2 hit points at level 1. And so it's like, all right, like I need to stop raging now. Otherwise, I'm gonna be like bleeding out when I'm done with this rage. And so that was a fun little mechanic there that I remember about the barbarian. And yeah, very strong. Okay, the bard, I'd say that was a weaker one, and not one that I would want to play very often. I don't even know if I'll rate them as overpowered or underpowered. I'm just gonna rate them as the ones that I would want to play and the ones that I wouldn't want to play as D tier. Okay, so I don't even know what a blood hunter is. What the world has Dungeons and Dragons come to? Oh, cleric. Okay. Um, Bart just sings songs, right? And so that was like a weird, like, cool class, like whatever. If you've played NetHack, it reminded me of playing like as the tourist. You have this like offshoot abilities, and you have a Hawaiian T-shirt, and it's like, what are you doing in NetHack? Just randomly having a tourist here. Um, but yeah, there. Hey, you wanted to be able to sing songs? Cool, play a bard. The cleric, really liked playing clerics. I thought they were very cool. They were just strong enough to be like a fighter, but they also could cast spells. And I think this is my theory. When they designed the cleric, they thought about making like some like weak sauce priest that would heal people. Then they got smart and they realized that what character playing this game is ever going to want to be a weak sauce priest who's just healing people, right? As their whole job is just to heal the party. And so even though it would be balanced, like the healer would provide just as much help as the fighter and just as much help as the wizard, variable. Maybe at higher levels the wizard is better than the fighter, but maybe in the beginning levels the fighter is better than the wizard. But overall, they should all be the same. When you're picking them, everybody wants to play something that's valuable and useful. And the priest was already balanced to be just as useful as the rest of them. The healing abilities were amazing, but it wouldn't be able to attack and it wouldn't be able to shoot lightning bolts like the fighter and the wizard. And so they're like, well, let's call it a cleric instead of some like weak sauce priest or white mage or whatever. And the cleric has a mace and deals 1d8 damage and has 8 hit points. So yeah, you got to watch out for the cleric because it's not just this frail 4 hit point wizard. It's strong. It's almost as strong as a fighter, but and it also can heal itself. So a cleric versus a fighter, the cleric's going to be able to hold its own if it can just heal itself. So yeah, the cleric is S tier. And then the cool specialization with each of the different god powers. Yeah, that was pretty exciting to have so many unique things with the cleric. Um, Clerics of different gods, right? So almost entirely different classes with among the cleric, um, within the cleric. And then warlock, I have no idea what that is. Druid, you'd have your own little animal pet. That was a tough one to run, but it was kind of like a cleric, but like powerful. Yes, like yeah, druid was like a powerful cleric, and you could kind of make a white mage like healer druid and get all the healing spells. I think that they had cure light wounds, as a cleric or as a druid, but you also had to like balance this animal thing and help the animals, and just have this animal helper the whole time. So that was kind of a cool one, but it was a little tougher to DM like as a dungeon master, because you had to be thinking about the person's pet and where their pet is and stuff like at all times. So that was not my favorite to be running as a dungeon master. Okay. Same with Bard, a little bit tougher. Fighters, those were easy to run as a dungeon master, and I really enjoyed the combos of the extra feats those fighters would get at level 1. I think level 1, 2, and 3 had a bonus feat, and then nothing at level 4, and then level 5, it would have a cool little feat, I think. I think that's what would end up happening. Fighter was a very cool one. I'll say Fighter's S tier. Like that was just so cool to to combo, and I read all the feats. Like the entire chapter 5, I think, of the player's handbook about feats. Chapter 4 is the skills, chapter 5 was the feats, was very heavily looked at by fighter players to try to use synergies and combos. Next up, homebrew. I don't care. All right, monk. That one was a third edition. I remember that guy. Um, Bunch of punching and stuff like that. So you didn't have to worry about weapons, but you just had to look up some rules about how the punchings happened and the multiple attacks they would be able to get. But then later on, some of those weapons they could actually use, like a kama, or it'd be like an extension of their arm, shurikens. So a little bit of rules to look up, but they were some cool rules to look up if you did look for the monk. Paladin is my favorite. It's like a fighter cleric. Loved having paladins, and I really loved the paladins for another reason, because they had their oath that they had. Now clerics kind of have an oath depending on what god they're worshiping, but paladins, they don't necessarily like follow a deity. They can, but it's more just the something even higher than a deity. It is the law of being as lawfully good as possible. And then a fallen paladin lost all their powers. And so you wanted to make sure that you didn't do anything evil as a paladin player. And as a dungeon master, I really enjoyed that. I was intrigued with the chaos to law and good to evil, nine square and the true neutral in the middle. I really, really enjoyed that, and I would tell players, "Oh, you're slipping based on your actions," and I would just rate their actions in the game. Like, I think that's a chaotic thing to do, or I think that's too evil of a thing to do. You're gonna drop down to neutral. And when I would do that, I noticed that players, as the dungeon master, I would see players ask me, where am I at now in my alignment? It was important to them to know where they were at, even if they weren't a paladin. But the paladin, I would give them many warnings before they would do something, like, hey, you slipped a little bit lower in your lawful. Like you're still lawful, but you slipped a little bit. And you need to be at that top corner of good and law. Um, Now, I think there's different like prestige classes of, at least there's a lawful evil one called Blackguard, and I don't know if there's a chaotic evil or a chaotic good version, but chaos, you don't really have to do much to sustain it. You just have to be kind of just you know kind of there's like laws of the universe where what things just atrophy into like not organized, right? I don't know that law off the top of my head, but like things just happen in life that in your actions that don't organize themselves. You actually have to make effort to be lawful, and so you'd have to make effort to be a paladin. Similarly, you'd have to make effort to be a blackguard, which is the most lawful evil possible thing. And and it was high emphasis on the law and high emphasis on the good, not just when you're a paladin, and high emphasis on the law and high emphasis on the evil when you're a blackguard. So if you started being a little chaotic, you would lose your blackguard abilities. If you start getting a little chaotic, but you're still doing good things as a paladin, then like if you lie to somebody so that you can gain a strategic advantage to help the good people, that would hurt you as a paladin. That was so exciting to balance with players. I remember one campaign I was running, the paladins eyesight wasn't so good, but the rangers was very good. And the ranger, that's going to be our next one we have. um, that's a really fun one to do. So the rangers, I'll put in an A tier, but the Rangers' eyesight was able to see um, not just the group of skeletons and the necromancer, but they also saw the maiden who is going to get sacrificed there. And this is an evil necromancer, and going to get eaten by the skeletons, right? And so there were too many skeletons; they wouldn't have survived, and it was icy. So they wouldn't have been able to make it to there anyways unless they got really lucky, right? So they got to jump the ice and then attack the necromancer and attack a bunch of like a horde of skeletons. And the ranger can see the maiden, but the paladin cannot. If the paladin knew that the maiden was there, the paladin would say, "We have to go and save her. It's the lawful thing to do. It's the good thing to do." But the ranger is thinking, maybe we save our own butts, right? Save ourselves. And so I take the ranger in another room and I say, "Hey, you see something different than them." And then we come back, and then the paladin's just like, "Okay, so what did you see?" Like all he told me was that I saw. I took them all in different rooms and told them what their spot checks saw from the distance. Like, Ranger, you probably saw better than me. Like, what did you see? Also, the dungeon master had to take you in a different room. So, and the paladin ends up pulling out the information from him. What do you really see, Ranger? And the Ranger's like, oh, yeah, my eyesight was just so good. I was able to see the maiden who's going to get sacrificed by this necromancer to the skeletons. Um, and then he's like, oh, we have to save her. And so he runs in and goes and saves her. And then it just becomes a fiasco. But like I think they all ended up dying at that point. But yeah, because the ranger had to tell the paladin or chose to tell the paladin, and then the paladin said, "Nope, we gotta go fight. We gotta do this because if I don't, then I lose my special powers of lawful goodness, and then I can't be basically as strong as a fighter and all the healing power of a cleric." So yeah, I'm gonna have to take the party and go uh, do my lawful good thing, and then yeah, paladin by far, and I have many other stories about paladins. Just paladins was my favorite. And then the rogue. The rogue, that one, I remember running a campaign where a bunch of rogues fought against, like fought in an army. Like it was an army of rogues. That's not how rogues are supposed to fight. Because I remember, like I had warriors, which is kind of like a fighter, but like only rolls like a D8 for hit points instead of a D10. And I had a bunch of warriors from the city guard fighting against these rogues, and then I just had didn't even have the rogues do like sneak attacks or anything. I just had them like go like all these high level rogues fighting all these mid level warriors, and the warriors clobbered the rogues. It's like what in the world? But yeah, like if you have like 3d8 hit points and somebody else has 66 hit points, you're about the same health. And like rogues are not that much better. And then the powers that you have as a level 3 warrior, and the weaponry you have and the AC you have with your armor is going to be just above what a rogue has at level 6. So all these level 6 rogues are getting destroyed in hand-to-hand combat with these level 3 warriors, not even fighters of the guard. And I was like, this is not making sense. So the way to play a rogue is not to just run right up as an army of rogues. I learned that the hard way with the mechanisms that the game has. And the top rogue of all of them, this like really high up, like level 7 or 8 rogue, she led the group of rogues that was going to these like thieves were raiding and raiding a place, but that's not how raiders would work. Like raiders would all be warriors or fighters or barbarians, but a rogue is more like a kind of like I'm on my own, maybe in a group of two or maybe three, and we're not all fighting together. We are fighting from different angles. We're using ranged attacks. We are not letting them get close to us. And if we do get close to them, we have the upper hand, a sneak attack. So the way to play a rogue is that. Don't just run right in and not use any of the benefits of a rogue. Funny stuff, though. Then we had the sorcerer. Sorcerer, that was an easier one to do because they just knew their powers. They didn't have to rest and prepare their powers for the next day. I think that was my favorite wizard or like magic user to do that wasn't a cleric. So yeah, sorcerer was fine. Maybe top of A tier. I'll put sorcerer at the top of A tier. And then finally, I liked the tracking of the ranger too. That was pretty cool. And then finally, we have the wizard. The wizard was just kind of like a B tier, and lowest of B tier because I just it was very difficult to read all the rules, and I was always making trying to make sure I got everything correct with the rules. Plus, you can have an animal companion later on, if you have the money for it. Like a lot of lot, and then you can cast spells from your animal companion. Like there's a lot of little gamey like rules uh, to try to figure out for the wizard, and I was okay with some of the fun little combos and rules lawyering that the fighter can do, but the wizard one that was a little tough, and so I thought that was one of the weaker ones of the sorcerer and the wizard and the fighter as far as like the ones that you really got to look at the rules and see what you can do because there's a lot of spells that the sorcerer and the wizard can do, but the wizard kind of has a lot of rules manipulation with it, whereas the sorcerer is just innately inside of them. They have magic, whereas wizards had to think for it. Let's see if I remember the stats. So you had strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. Okay. And I remember I always liked the charisma. That was a cool thing in my mind. Like, oh, there's a stat in Dungeons and Dragons that's supposed to represent life, right? Yeah, it's supposed to represent life. So do I have good charisma? I don't know. But that's kind of exciting, that there's like a measurable like stat in this game for how liked you are. And me growing up, I wasn't the most popular kid, but among all friend groups, but among my nerdy friend groups, I felt like I could kind of be a little bit of a leader in some instances, right? And so I felt like I was a little bit of an introvert slash extrovert, depending on the group that I was in, a little more extroverted and a little more feeling like I had a little bit of charisma, right? A little bit of know what to say in the right situation. And so yeah, that was exciting. So the paladin needs some charisma, needs some strength, and needs some wisdom. Okay. Third edition cleric, most important is their wisdom. That's how they get their spells. Paladin also gets their spells from wisdom, but cleric gets spells at level one, and very much so, like a lot more spells than the paladin's just got laying on of hands, and later on gets actual spells, not just a laying on of hands healing ability. But the cleric wisdom, and then constitution's important for a cleric, and then charisma, a little bit of charisma because that's how they do their fighting against the undead. There's a way they can turn undead, and so that was another cool power of the cleric to be anti-undead. The fighter, most important are the top three physical ones: strength, and then dexterity, and then constitution. And then for the barbarian, I think it was strength at the top still, but then constitution was the second most because the barbarian needed to having a higher constitution let them stay in their rage longer, I think. But dexterity was also very important for the barbarian as well. And maybe even the fighter, if they had a lot of armor on, then their dexterity didn't matter as much, and so it was just like the fighter: strength, then constitution, then dexterity. Um, sorcerer, sorcerer, I believe it was charisma to get their spells because it's an innate thing inside of them. Um, and I think that's the only magic user that used charisma because paladin didn't use charisma for their spells per se, but they did use charisma for something else. Something else with the paladin. They needed a high charisma. Like strength was the most important, I think, but like all the attributes were important for a paladin. You just wanted to be really high in everything except for intelligence for a paladin. Um, yeah, but yeah, sorcerer, charisma definitely, and then the two ones that save you from getting attacked: dexterity for blocking the attack, and then constitution for if you get attacked, you don't immediately die for sorcerer. Same thing for wizard, except wizard was intelligence, very important, and then a little bit for dexterity and constitution. Barbarian we talked about. Ranger, it was very important for dexterity, and then wisdom. Like wisdom was how they did their spells, but dexterity was very important and strength. So they needed to use their dexterity. A lot of their skills were based on dexterity. Um, yeah, so ranger definitely those ones are important. Monks, The monks, I think the important one, wisdom, helped them with increasing their AC, their armor class, and dexterity was important. So the idea with a monk was just to have like a really high armor class so you could never get hit, and then you hit a lot. You'd have multiple attacks. You're just this unarmed like fighting machine. Your hands are just super powerful. You're a martial artist if you're a monk. Okay. Yeah, AC and wisdom. Rogue was a lot of their skills were based on wisdom and intelligence, so those were both important. But the most important was dexterity, being able to sneak around, move silently, things like that. And the bard, I believe, was charisma for their songs, wisdom for their spells, and dexterity just so if they get hit, they don't get hit, they run around and dodge. Druid was, I think, wisdom for their spells, and yeah, definitely wisdom for their spells, and then important to have dexterity and constitution. Yeah, just to survive. So kind of similar to the wizard with intelligence, but then to survive dexterity and constitution, and then the sorcerer, uh, wisdom to survive, but then dexterity and constitution. Kind of like cleric, really. Cleric and druid are like similar. Um, like cleric gets your abilities from your god, and then druid gets your abilities from nature. Wisdom for your stuff, and then have your constitution and dexterity good. Oh nope, sorry. The cleric also is charisma, very much higher in charisma than intelligence. So yeah, these guys cared about charisma a lot, and yeah, those three, four, I guess, cared a lot about charisma, and that was like my favorite stat. Really opened my eyes playing in Dungeons and Dragons, and I'll end with that. If I had not played Dungeons and Dragons, I wouldn't be the person I am today, and I learned a lot from Dungeons and Dragons in my experience, and I took it into board gaming, into the mechanics within Lord of the Rings, or sorry, not Lord of the Rings, the mechanics in Dungeons and Dragons. I would like to see in future board games. Make a board game out there about if you reach -10 hit points, you actually die. Make a board game out there with armor class and having. Do you want to wear armor to help your armor class, or do you want to uh, just rely on your dexterity to have a higher armor class? If you don't have a high dexterity anyways, then just put on a bunch of armor. But make tough decisions like that. There's got to be a game out there somehow, without the fiddliness that Dungeon Dragons had, or the long time of playing it that ultimately stopped me from playing Dungeons and Dragons. But if you do still play Dungeons and Dragons, let me know if I got anything wrong with those, the stats. I know a lot has changed. I don't know any of these Artificer, Blood Hunter, Warlock, Homebrew, whatever. I don't know any of those. The landscape has changed from Dungeons and Dragons, and I've left that world. But comment below if you're in that phase of playing both Dungeons and Dragons and role playing games and board games, and how you feel like they mesh together, and where the future will be for these different zones of our hobby space. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day gaming.